Hello and welcome. My name's Harry Waters and you're watching Renewable English. Today's the first lesson, so I'm going to tell you a little bit about the course. For years, I've struggled to understand why traditional textbooks only ever have one unit on climate change, and it's usually called Mad Weather or Our Plastic Oceans. It kind of gives kids an early closure and they get bored of the topic of climate change really early on. So, what we're trying to do here at Renewable English is develop one off classes that can run alongside the traditional themes in textbooks like fashion or food or transport, and they can complement the classes you're already giving. In each class, we aim to assess our own behaviour and see what we can do to help improve our planet's rapidly deteriorating health, and with it, reduce our own carbon footprint. Today's lesson is all about electricity consumption in the home. So, without further ado, let's go. As you know, this course is as much for students as it is for teachers. But remember, if you need to stop and think about a question or do a reading, if you see this sign, it's a good idea to hit the pause button. So, let's get started. As I mentioned before, today's class is all about electricity consumption in the home. The class has 5 main objectives. You can see them there on your screen. We're going to start by defining a carbon footprint. We're going to learn about electricity consumption in the home. We're going to learn where it comes from, and with that, why it's so harmful to the environment. Then we're going to think about how we can change our behaviours at home. And finally, we're going to make a planet promise, which is something I aim to do at the end of every class. So, what is a carbon footprint? Have a quick read there. So as you can see, a carbon footprint is the mark we leave on the earth. Today, we're going to look at our own individual carbon footprint, how much CO2 we produce, ourselves as a household, and then we're going to look at it on a more global scale with different countries and their effect on the environment. So, how many electrical appliances can you think of? I'm going to move myself out of the way so you can have a think without distraction. Obviously, there's a few clues on the picture. What else can you think of at home? How many did you get in that time? Did anybody get more than 10? If you did, very well done. It's very strange how many things we need to power our lives. And we really need to think, do we need to use them as often as we do? Moving on. I want you to look at this picture and decide which word goes with which picture. If you need to pause, press pause now. If not, we'll roll on to the answers. You can see the first one there is an iron. Iron. Remember that the R in iron is silent. So the first one is an iron. The next one, something I'm sure most of us have, a smartphone, more specifically, the smartphone while it's charging. The oven, the best place to cook a pizza, a dishwasher, a TV, and of course, Britain's favourite electrical appliance, a kettle. We'll hear more about that very shortly. Now I'd like you to stop and think for a moment, how much electricity does each appliance use? Hit the pause button if you need a bit more time to think. Bear in mind, these are watts per hour, so obviously you'll use a kettle for less time than you will use an oven, for example. But you can still see the large energy output by certain different appliances. Okay, so I've given you a moment to think there. Let's move on and see the answers. So, what wattage? The iron there uses about 1,100 watts. Charging your phone only uses up to 5 watts. Cooking that pizza, you're using a lot of electricity there, between 2,000 and 2,200 watts. The dishwasher, vital in a lot of houses. Make sure it's fully packed if you're using it. Don't waste any space in there. That's about 1,050 to 1,500 watts. The television, 170 watts. Remember, don't leave that on standby. And the kettle, a massive 2,200 to 3,000 watts. Obviously, this depends on the appliance that you're using. There are more specific places you can look to see what your particular brand is and the electrical output from that brand. I mentioned before we'd look more closely at kettles. A strange thing to look at perhaps, but as a British person myself, I must admit I am partial to a spot of tea. Now there's something called the kettle effect, which leads to spikes in electrical usage and electricity consumption. This is sometimes called the kettle effect or the TV pickup effect. In these instances, the UK sometimes needs to borrow their electricity from France. Now, so what is the kettle effect? Well, in the UK, when something stressful is about to happen, or you need to have a chat with somebody, or basically for anything, British people love to put the kettle on. We're going to have a quick look here at some big events in British history that have caused people to put their kettle on. You can see the lightning there. That's the normal usage of electricity. Have a quick look at those 3 events and how many different kettles went on in that moment and a huge surge in electricity. If you want to learn a bit more about the kettle effect, there's a fantastic video from the BBC down there, and I'll leave the link in the descriptions below. I'd like you to think now, what is renewable energy and is that renewable? Basically, renewable energy is something you can use again and again and again. The gift that keeps on giving. So the different options we have here, of course, we've got wind, hydroelectric, fossil fuels, geothermal energy, solar energy, and of course nuclear. I want you to think, is it renewable or isn't it? Wind energy. It is renewable, of course. Geothermal energy is also renewable. What do you have for hydroelectric energy? What do you have there? Of course, it's renewable, of course. Solar energy. Very good. Fossil fuels, absolutely not renewable. Absolutely not. There is a finite amount of oil and coal and gas in the world. And if we continue burning it at the rate we are, there will be none left. Nuclear energy is also not renewable. It has its pluses and its minuses, that's for sure. Let's look a bit more closely at the CO2 emissions from these different forms of energy production, rather. If you need to pause it now, feel free to pause it. There will be some questions in a couple of slides' time. You might need to rewind. I'll let you take a quick look there. I'd really like to draw your attention, particularly to coal and natural gas. Look at the amount of CO2 produced. So, the next stage is a very quick reading. I'll ask you to hit pause when we get to it, so we don't have to sit around for 3 or 4 minutes looking at me feeling awkward. So if you could hit pause now, that'd be fantastic, and have a quick read of this article. So, are you ready for some questions? Now, I hope your first question isn't, why does he keep saying so? I don't know. I guess it's a nervous tick. Have a look here. Which type of energy has the smallest carbon footprint? If you need to rewind to have a quick look again, feel free. Which type of energy produces most of the UK's energy and electricity? In 2016, how much electricity was produced using renewable energy? And what is the EU target for the end of this year? What did we read before? So when you're ready, the answers are coming up. Moving on from here, I'd like to take a look at different countries' carbon footprints. And before we look too closely at this table, which we will do shortly, feel free to pause if you have to. I'd like you to look at that first number. It's over 10 billion. So before we come back to this, it is video clock. And this guy over here is going to explain to you a little bit more about the number 10 billion. Take it away. So let's go back to the table ever so briefly so you can digest and have a quick look. We've got country, the tons of CO2 emissions, their population, and the per capita in tons. So that's the number of tons of CO2 emissions per person. Right then, 10 billion. That's quite a number. But how big is it exactly? Think of it in seconds. Everyone knows how long a second is, right? There's one. There's another one. There's another one. You get the picture. Anyway, if we were to stand here for 1 million seconds, that's a 1 with 6 zeros, 1 million seconds, we'd be here for more than 11 days. A billion, that's with 9 zeros, I'd have to stand here for over 31 years. It's ridiculous. If I was counting in seconds for 10 billion seconds, that's a 10 with 9 zeros, I would be here counting for more than 317 years. It's just ridiculous. But now we're going to look at CO2 emissions, and for that, I'm going to take you outside. Come on. In a 2009 study by Rob Davis, he found that your average family barbecue would burn about 500 grams of CO2. So let's have a look over here. Here's my average family barbecue. It's a bit wet, so I'm struggling to light it. So what would it take for me to make 1 ton of carbon emissions? Well, it would take this average family barbecue plus 1,999 others. Now, I don't even know 2,000 people, so I'm not sure how I'd get that started. So how would me and my 1,999 barbecuing buddies make 10 billion tons of CO2 emissions? Well, all we have to do is burn 1 barbecue every second from now until 2338. That's over 317 years. Right then, happy barbecuing. Well, thanks very much for that. So before we look at the table again, let's take a look at those numbers. 10 billion, that's a 10 and 9 zeros. In seconds, remember 1 billion seconds over 31 years. So 10 billion seconds in this case is over 317 years. Each barbecue we mentioned would give off about 500 grams of CO2 emissions, and thus it would take 2,000 to make 1 ton. Quick recap again. Me and my 1,999 imaginary friends would be cooking our barbecues until the year 2338, as long as we cooked 1 per second, day in, day out, for over 317 years. A likely story. We're going to look very quickly again at the table, so you can take in the numbers. If you need to pause, go ahead. And now it's time for some questions. Now for some questions. According to my calculations, how long would it take me and my 1,999 friends to make 10 billion tons of CO2 emissions, the same amount as China in 2018, if we made 1 barbecue every second? Excellent work. Over 317 years. Which country produces the most CO2 emissions? It is China. Which 2 countries have the largest populations? China and India. Which country creates the most CO2 emissions per capita, so per person? It is the USA, according to this table. Now, we've talked about the huge amount of pollution that is created in China. I would like to draw your attention to the fact that it's not all bad. If we look at the amount invested in renewable energies, and the amount that the Chinese government and people are looking into renewable energies and how to produce electricity, we can see that a few years ago, China produced almost half of the world's investment into renewable energy. 45% came from one country. And you can see they even have a solar field with some cute pandas in it. What can go wrong there? So have a look there at some of the quick facts. It's not all doom and gloom. There is hope on the horizon with the production of electricity. So hopefully there'll be more investment the world over to help improve this situation. So the head scratcher, what can I do? How can I stop this much electricity being produced? Well, the first basic step is to look at yourself and to look at home. I'm going to show you a video now of my daughter with her top 5 tips on how to reduce electricity consumption in the home. So when you're ready, Ali, take it away.
Hey guys, turn off unnecessary lights. Unplug unused electronics. Hang dry your laundry. Towel dry before you use a hairdryer. Defrost things overnight, not in the microwave. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thanks very much for that, my dear. So here are the top tips that Ali gave us and how we can adjust our own behavior to make sure we are producing as little electricity as possible. Bit of a tongue twister there. So the first one is to turn off unnecessary lights. When you leave the room, just flick the switch. Unplug your unused electronics, especially chargers. Once you finish charging, pull the plug. Hang dry your laundry when possible, of course, and towel dry your hair as much as you can. And the last one here is to defrost overnight and not in the microwave. There are so many different things that you can do at home. So I'm going to ask you if you can do a little project for me. So this is project time. In this project, I'd like you to think of 5 ways to save electricity around the home. And if you would be so kind as to make a poster, you can post it in the Renewable English Facebook group if you so desire. You can even make a video if you want, like Alethea did. I went to Canva to make my fast and easy energy saving tips. They're not all exactly the same as what Alethea said, but they are along the same lines. You can see I suggest turning off lights when not necessary, unplugging your charger after charging, cooking with a lid, switching off appliances from standby mode, and air drying your laundry. What can you think of? Make a poster, send it in. So I like to end classes with a planet promise. We're going to do this every single week. We're going to make the planet promise with every single class. And at the end of the class, at the end of the next class, we'll think about our previous promise and if we have stuck to it. So, I, Harry Waters, promise to turn off all the lights when I leave the room and not leave my computer on standby at night because there is no planet B. What's your promise? If you want to make a video and send it in, feel free, or simply write it in the comments below. Let's look back at our objectives for today's class. Do we understand a little better about our carbon footprints? Both personal and household, and also for the country. Did we learn about electricity consumption at home? Did we learn where energy comes from? Did we think about how to reduce electricity consumption at home? And did we make a planet promise? Hopefully we did. There's a quick lesson glossary here if you'd like to pause it. It's also on the worksheet, which is more or less the PowerPoint broken down without any answers, and a bit more a detailed lesson glossary. So finally, thanks for watching episode 1. In episode 2, we're going to be talking about water waste, and I have got a very, very, very special guest, somebody very close to my heart. We'll be watching an interview she did with Thames Water, and we'll also be interviewing her personally. You can follow, comment, and do whatever you please on the YouTube page. We're also on Twitter, Insta, and Facebook. So feel free to say what you think. If there's any particular topic you'd like to talk about, why not drop it in the comments box? If there's anything you'd like to learn more about with Renewable English, then please let me know. We're here for 12 separate classes. So hopefully teachers, it will give you something to supplement your traditional textbook, and students, I've enjoyed learning with you today. So I'm going to say goodbye and thank you very much. And I'll see you next time. Remember, keep saving that planet, and that is a disaster. So, thanks very much for watching. That's all from me. I'm going to say goodbye on this camera because I think it's a slightly nicer angle. Thanks very much for listening. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you soon. Thanks again for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Cheers. Bye-bye.